All right, hello, and welcome to the Rock Metal Podcast. I'm your host, John Harris, and today on Rock Metal Podcast, we have After Time. They have a new EP called Infinite Legacy, which for the Twitch stream out there, that is twitch.tv/the Rock Metal Podcast. The album, or the EP rather, is dropping on November 5th, so that's in 3 days. And then for all of the rest of you out there who are tuning in post facto on like YouTube or Spotify, Apple Music, wherever it is you're tuning in as podcast format, it dropped on November 5th, so it is definitely available for you to check out wherever it is you consume music. Right now I'm being joined by Chris and Sarah from AFTERTIME to share more about this stellar release. I'm super excited. It's one of my favorite kinds of music ever. So Chris, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hello, John. Thank you for having us.
Hello.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for showing up and for making some great music, because I was super excited. What do you guys call it again? I was going to call it like symphonic metal, but I think the actual name that I was handed was cinematic metal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we
symphonic works, but
because we double down on the orchestration and we add a lot more choir and we use a lot of storytelling in our music, so that's kind of how we separate it from standard symphonic metal.
Okay. More storytelling. Take us through that. Does it happen musically? Does it happen lyrically? Is it both?
Both, yeah. In fact, our full-length album, which dropped in September of last year, we consider to be a concept album that tells a story of these voyagers that leave their homeland, they set off to discover the world, just find what's out there for them, leave their legacy, and we do tell that story both through the lyrics of the songs as well as some very vast and epic orchestral instrumental breaks in a few of the songs as well.
Okay, very cool. Now, I guess my next question is, how do you tell a story with music and adding in those cinematic elements? Does it make it easier? Does it make it harder now that you've got a French horn and a choir and a distorted guitar and a bass and a regular vocal?
It can be interesting telling a story musically, especially when you've got all of those layers of instruments. You gotta be careful which ones you use, and when you do and don't use them, because it can be really easy to just overwhelm stuff. But instruments have their own timbres, and if you want some soft stuff, French horns are really great for that, or a soft choir. Or if you really want to drive something home, you let some horns blare and whatnot. And between the story and the lyrics and the story that we can then cinematically portray in the music, we can actually get a solid story across, I think.
Okay. Now, my next big frothing question is, you mentioned the last album was a concept album of sorts. This EP, Infinite Legacy, is it also a concept? Is it continuing on?
It is. Yep. We are treating it as sort of an epilogue to the story that The Farthest Shore told. So this EP is more about the legacy left behind by those original voyagers and the generations that have now come after to continue this discovery and exploration.
Okay. Perfect. What is that journey? What is that exploration? For everybody who's listening in, watching, and they don't know what's happening.
So in the original, in The Farthest Shore, they've left their homeland, which was rather oppressive. It stifled their creativity. They wanted to keep them trapped forever. They had to fight their way out onto the open ocean. And along the way, they encounter terrible storms. They find, lush forests. They stumble across a sanctuary of sorts with mysticism and mystery involved in that. And then they find what they believe at that time to be the farthest shore, and they realize that there was never really a destination for them. It was really about the journey itself, and that, they were, that's one of the song titles. They were always going to want to continue to explore what else is out there, what else can they discover, what other adventures can they have. And they kind of awoke that spirit in the rest of the people that heard about these tales coming back to the homeland, and encouraged more people to want to go out and find their way and discover more things.
This almost sounds like, I don't know, dealing with my parents.
In what way?
Stifling creativity, having to fight my way through.
Sure.
Well, that's
We try
not.
to leave some stuff open-minded and open-ended so that, people can interpret however it speaks to them.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get too deep, but that's the story for a lot of artists these days. Kids are growing up, but you're like, you got to go to college, you got to get a good job, you got to, get married, have kids, have a solid future. And we're like, look, we want to make some music, and we want to tour and share this music and our stories with people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed, baby. All right, so we chatted about cinematic metal so far, and we could call it symphonic, but cinematic, I think, is a term that I haven't heard in a long time. I'm thinking back, this is how old I am, I'm thinking back to like a Queensryche album where Operation Mindcrime, the term used to describe it was cinematic. It had these elements to it that helped to create the story, such as choirs, and their horns were like those cheesy 80s synthesizer horns.
Yeah.
Which were so time and place. Like as soon as you hear those, you know that it was like a Motley Crue record or something.
They had those in plenty of movie soundtracks from the 80s as well. They were everywhere.
Yeah, they're great. Now, my next question then is, these elements, because in the 80s they used cheesy synthesizers and we were okay with it. Did you guys actually hire a choir? Did you guys hire people? How did that come together?
Yes, our choir has kind of evolved over the last few years from a group of friends from the local community college to we actually found a group for the Farthest Shore and Infinite Legacy here in the Twin Cities called Minneapolis Impulse, MPLS. And they're a group of young adults. I think there's 20-something in total, and we used 16 of them in the choir for the album. And their whole mission is to bring choir to places that don't normally hear choir. So they've performed in planetariums, they've performed in breweries, they've done a few different outdoor events. And so when a metal band approaches them to sing on the album, it was a match made in heaven. And they really elevated the sound, because digital instruments have come so far and you can get them to sound so realistic these days, but you can't really mimic the human voice in the same way, particularly because it's not just all ahs, we're singing words, we're singing language, there's pronunciation and there's inflection that a human voice makes that you just can't digitize. So having the live choir was really, really important to us, and we really hope to keep working with them on future releases.
Yeah. How did you guys write notes for them? How did that happen? How did you guys communicate with the choir to sing what they sang? Sung.
They got the sheet music. We drafted sheet music for them ahead of time, broke it into SATB, and they rehearsed on their own a couple times, and then Brad, the main composer in our band, as well as the rhythm guitarist, and I, the two of us, went and rehearsed with the choir once, and then we were with them in the recording studio. And so they were skilled enough to basically, understand the notes and the rhythms just fine leading up to that one rehearsal with us. And then when we were there, we were able to give them certain inflection notes, certain, it was important to let them hear the rest of what was going on in the song, so they knew what kind of energy we were going for. They can kind of match the vibe of what the orchestra is doing at that time. And they were really intuitive, I think, on following that lead.
Mm-hmm. So they were, I don't want to call them an afterthought, but it sounds like everything was pretty much there and you were just looking to fill in the gaps with the choir?
We actually plan out our songs quite a ways in advance. when we write a song, we're like, all right, we'll want this sort of energy in a song, and we want to really include these instruments, or a choir or what have you. And with songs like Forge Your Destiny, which I wrote with the intent purpose of having Sarah line, choir line, Brad line, choir line, or something like that. Yeah, I think so. And so I intentionally wanted to have a choir in between every other line as like a separate sort of voice in the song. And so a lot of our songs, we do definitely plan on having the choir from the get-go. It just depends on, when we can get that choir, or when we're able to record them.
Okay, perfect. So cinematic metal, working with a live choir. What else is there to chat about? Infinite Legacy, the music video. Let's chat about that, because it's animated and that's cool, and that doesn't happen as much as I think it should. And so for everybody watching in right now on the live stream, if you head over to YouTube, type in AFTERTIME Infinite Legacy, the music video will come up. Those tuning in on YouTube right now, or Spotify or Apple Music, in the show notes for today will be a link to not only aftertimeofficial.com, you can head out and check out all the band stuff, but the music video for Infinite Legacy as well. So guys, take it away. Tell us about this animated music video.
So we were the two that mostly handled that project, so
yeah,
the perfect ones to answer that. It was kind of our baby, or at least my baby at first.
It was Sarah's baby.
It was my baby, all the way back to like March. Because we had wanted to do a couple of music videos for a couple of the farthest shore tracks, and due to a number of different factors, they weren't able to come together. And so I was determined to make sure that the Infinite Legacy video happened. And so when we first started kind of brainstorming some ideas back in the spring, we thought of maybe doing an animated music video, especially given the pandemic and trying to hire actors and a crew to do a live action one. It was one of the struggles we had with the previous ones. So we kind of threw around some ideas of, how would we want to tell this story visually? What would that look like? And we kind of ended up coming up with this idea around cave paintings, because the story of the song is basically a love letter to the history of humanity, and how from all the way back to the time of the caveman all the way up to now, mankind has always, we've always desired to learn more, to discover more, and to then take what we've learned and discovered and pass that along to the next generation to take that and go the next step further. And so we thought about the cave paintings and how that makes you think about how long humanity's been around, how far we've come since then. And we kind of came up with a basic skeletal structure of what that would look like. And we found this amazing animator. His studio is called Modularity Creatives. The guy we worked with on that, his name is Pablo. And he took that idea and expanded it even more, because he said, if we stick with the cave paintings the whole time, it might get a little visually boring. So what if we do this idea where we sort of shift between the cave painting scenes and actual scenes in those eras of history? And it just ended up coming together so brilliantly. We're so happy with how it turned out. It really does cover through the history of mankind, not up to modern day, but up to the time of the farthest shore journey, which is roughly based on like the 1600s, that era of discovery, discovering the new world. And it's a really brilliant story. We're so happy with how it turned out.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. You mentioned love letter to history of humanity. One of the things that reminded me of was I went to culinary school, and I learned a lot of things in culinary school, speaking of developing food throughout history. And one of the ones that I learned that really struck a chord with me as being human was when we made bread. We learned how to take apart animals. We learned how to, make all kinds of stuff from scratch, from soups to stews and whatnot. But something that just touched me as like what makes us human is bread. It's like just this idea that we can take this grain and that water and bring it together, put it in the oven, and then we have something that we can only create as being human, because the animal kingdom can't do that.
Yeah, it's almost alchemy compared to just throwing stuff in a bowl, you know?
Yeah.
You're actually processing ingredients and stuff. That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah. Cool. You mentioned like learning things and discovery, and yeah, it's cool things to think about, all the things that we have on a regular basis that can only come from the fact that we have this brain, because we don't really have much else.
Yeah, if you look at like evolutionarily, like bipedal animals are not the ones that usually make it through evolution and Darwinism, but
Yeah.
we've adapted in other kinds of ways. And
We're smart.
Yeah, that kind of intellectual stuff is the kind of subject matter that we like to cover in our music. We like to draw a more not highbrow, like, you know, a more stimulating conversation with our music, and the people that like that kind of stuff. History geeks, science geeks.
Yes. Stimulating metal. Cinematically stimulating metal.
I'm going to use that now.
You should. We are for the highbrow people.
Yes.
So please bring your Prosecco to the show. We don't want beer. We don't want ale.
Let us contemplate Socrates.
Yes, exactly.
And afterwards, we shall have an intelligent discussion.
Yes, we will have intelligent discourse revolving around the complexities and intricacies
Of the universe.
of the universe. Fantastic. Yeah, that's really cool. So anybody out there listening in, wherever you're listening in, YouTube, Twitch, throw us down in the comments below. What do you think is the maximum cultivation of humanity? I know I mentioned bread, which is kind of a fun one to just think about, because we've had it for so long. We sort of take it for granted. But the day I learned how to bring those things together, I was like, this is the core of humanity right here, in my opinion. Another animal can take down a gazelle, like a lion can take down a gazelle and rip it apart. Cool. We rip it apart with a knife. Okay.
And every culture has their own kind of bread too. Like even from all over the world, completely separate cultures, like they all still manage to come up with some version of their own bread.
Yeah.
Which is really cool too.
Exactly. Cool. What about you guys? Is it the computer? Is it the internet? What? I think the internet destroyed humanity, but that's another story. What do you guys think is like the ultimate, like that's human right there?
I'm going to be really cheesy and say art.
Okay.
I mean, you can look at bird song, or you can look at, you know, whales communicating to each other through whale noises. I'm not sure what they're called.
Whale songs.
You can look at, you know, the chimpanzees that have been taught how to paint, but it's not really coming from the same place that humans create art. We are creating both visual and audio art to convey an emotion or a feeling or an experience to connect with other human beings. And, you know, it's one of those really basic things you hear all the time where, you know, music or art can fill in when words can't. And I don't think animals really, even if we could say it sort of is art that they create in certain instances, it's not coming from the same place that where humans come from.
Chris?
I think it's somewhere between our ability to have a sense of curiosity and wonderment. This leads to being able to be inspired by art and make connections with other people, all the way up to having a curiosity for what's beyond our shores, what's beyond our planet, what's beyond our galaxy. There's a reason that we've always looked up in the night sky and strove to go up there. And I'm a super nut for astronomy and everything going on with space right now. And yeah, I can't sit still for very long without thinking about everything that's going on around me and how we're like in the beginning of the space age. And it just gets your mind going so quick to think about what sort of things can we make in the next, couple of years. Technology has been accelerating so quickly, and nowadays it's becoming more and more reasonable for people to go into space and go into orbit and be able to look down on planet Earth and see the entire globe, and there's just so much so much perspective you can gain from thinking about what's outside of where you are currently, and I think that can do wonderful things for our minds.
Thanks, Chris. It's a little tear that came down.
Beautiful. I guess the next Aftertime album is going to deal with space.
Mm-hmm.
Spoilers.
If it isn't an Aftertime album, it'll be a Chris Radke side project solo album.
Yeah. An astronaut floating around the globe with a loaf of bread and a paintbrush and an easel painting.
Oh my God, I love it.
That's not too far off of the Inspiration 4 mission that happened last month, so...
Okay, very cool. The album will just be called like -human-, and it's just going to include human.
Instead of human nature, it'll be human.
Human, baby. That's right. True.
I'm into it.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is the pandemic, as much as I think it's incredibly destroyed humanity, at least in the early days when it was a fun time, it was like a sleepover. There was no toilet paper. We were going to lock down. Like, it was fun at first.
It was kind of fun in a weird, twisted sort of way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like challenge mode.
I know. I spent so much time at home that, we started cooking more often and started making food from scratch. And I think food is at that core where basically we need to sleep, have sex, and eat food. Like, that's really all we need to do. And since I got down to that core, I just started thinking about being human is awesome. Like, if we actually stop and think about being human, and I think so much of us are actually another human capability is being able to mentally separate ourselves from our own existence and think that we're separate from the earth when we're not, or separate from the universe when we're not. We're all a part of it. It's like trying to separate a wave, like the wave from the ocean. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
We're a wave in the ocean.
Forget it these days.
Yeah.
That we're still part of the food chain. We're still part of the ecosystem.
That's right. Sweet. So that concludes my questions. Everybody listening in right now, head over to the rockmetalpodcast.ca in there for today's show notes. Not for Twitch, that's not going to be up yet, but for like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. In today's show notes, you'll have links. So those links are aftertimeofficial.com, the band's website. Also, as well, the music video for Infinite Legacy, which is going to be out on November 5th. So, gang, that concludes my questions. Thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.